This is the IDP After Show.
Hello and welcome to the IDP After Show with me, your host, Jase Abbey. I've been very much looking forward to bringing you the Week 2 IDP preview episode. And as is the case every week, I'll be joined by one of the brightest minds in IDP to focus on a combination of players we think have some of the best and worst weekly matchups. We kicked things off with a bang last week as I was joined by Tom Kislingberry for our debut episode. And this week, I've got yet another phenomenal guest. Welcome to the show of the IDP Show and DLF fame, Jason King. Jason, how the hell are you, my man?
Oh, I'm doing great. Fame, maybe a little strong.
No, I'm sticking with it.
Last week was great. It was really good to hear you on with Tom. Y'all just did a bang up job on it.
I just had to be there. I let Tom do all the work. That's my job as the host, right? So
that's just how you have to roll when Tom's in the room.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So yeah, Jason, did you like many of us NFL nuts completely forego your friends and family between Thursday and Monday of last week and instead dedicate yourself to the bumper slate of NFL games?
Oh gosh, I either dragged them along with me or I ignored them. Yes, I mean everybody knows now. So I'm going to lock myself. I'm either going to go to a football game or I'm going to lock myself in my house and don't bother me after 1 o'clock because it's what I'm going to be doing. Don't even try. Don't try to get me to help out with anything.
You're a braver man than me. I try to keep those both things happy, I guess. Trying to get some games in whilst also at least seeming to appear to be part of conversations with friends and family as I'm going along, but it didn't really work out.
You're too good, Jason.
So for those who missed last week's show, and shame on you for doing so, a quick reminder of the format. Jason and I are going to discuss a total of 4 linebackers, 4 defensive linemen, and 4 defensive backs who we think have a chance to either produce or disappoint in week 2. We're also giving our audience an opportunity to drive some of the content for the weekly show. And to that end, to finish the episode, we'll discuss the player who our followers have nominated in our weekly poll on X. And this week, the winner of that poll was week 1 legend, Greg Rousseau of the Bills, who finished with 3 sacks and a forced fumble. But for now, let's kick things off with our nominations at linebacker. Jason, my guest, you're going first. Which player at the position do you think has a good chance to be productive in week 1 and why?
Yep. So just context, I will probably stay away from, with my picks, I'll probably stay away from the obvious guys. You're not going to necessarily want to start everybody that I mentioned here if you've got, just the obvious options out there. Like, if you've got Alex Singleton, you're not going to want me to tell you that you need to play him this week over my pick, because he's the tackle king and he's got the run heavy Steelers this week. So I'm not going to go out and talk about Alex Singleton, but I will talk about Shaq Thompson. So most of you, like me, probably had Shaq Thompson on your bench if you actually have him rostered this year. But he saw 100% of the snaps for Carolina in week 1. Carolina gets the Chargers this week, and they ran on 27 plays in week 1. Which, granted is not like a massive number by any stretch, but it is among the upper half of the league. And we know that it's on the ground that Jim Harbaugh wants to see his offense run. So with Derek Brown out, unfortunately, on IR, I know that Panthers interior is probably going to look even more inviting for opposing run games, and they'll be sending it right up the gut, I have no doubt. So I really do like Thompson. I like Jewell too, just to have like this good tackle floor there at home. So Shaq Thompson's my pick.
Yeah, no disagreement here. There was that, slight concern. What will that snap share look like between the two guys, Jewell and Thompson? Either one of them could have been the guy. Turned out it was both of them, right? Both of them. Thompson definitely played every down. Jewell was really close to doing so. To my mind, they're both reliable starters every week.
Yep, depending on depth for sure. If you're only rolling out a couple of linebackers each week in a 10-team league, you've probably got better options. But yeah, I'm pretty confident starting Shaq as like an LB3, LB4 from here on out until, he gets hurt or something changes. But for now, yeah, he's good.
Yeah, and I like the call on Derek Brown and the opponent being the Chargers. I singled out Robert Spillane in this section as my linebacker like for week 1 for that same reason you did. Run heavy Chargers, and that worked out well. So yeah, keeping with the same thing. I'm all aboard for Thompson.
I'm just following along right behind you, Jase.
So the linebacker I came away feeling good about last week was Zack Baun of the Eagles. Look, we're all aware of the positive news surrounding him in recent months. He spent a lot of time with the first team in practice. Eagles coaches were constantly talking him up. All the signs pointed towards him heavily being involved, right? But he did have some competition. Devin White joined the team in the offseason, and although he kind of disappointed towards the end, I guess, of his time in Tampa, he brought a level of experience at that linebacker spot that Baun didn't really have. And then there was Nakobe Dean. He's obviously been injured or disappointing so far during his career, but he looked pretty good in the preseason. So it wasn't a given that Baun was going to be that guy that we were promised. It wasn't a given he was going to be the guy. And it goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway. 13 tackles, 2 sacks, every down roll. That might not happen every week, or certainly the stat line won't. But after that performance, the Eagles, they'd kind of be silly not to ride the hot hand into week 2. It was really nice to see, is either Sirianni or Fangio, I can't remember who, talking Baun up again, talking about his relentless motor. They were obviously pretty enamored with what they saw. So, yeah, Baun for me, I was slow to become a convert. You might remember, Jason, me sort of throwing some water on the fire of Baun in the preseason in our chat group. But now I'm all the way there. Are you with me? Were you slow to convert to Baun?
Well, it's always kind of hard to come around to players that you have this notion of what they are. And I had a notion that, Baun was not it. Wasn't sure if he was, supposed to be a Sam, edge rusher, or off ball. And sometimes it just takes that change of scenery and the right coaching really to, I guess, bring it out in some guys. So, yeah, it's I can't say that, I'm all the way sold. I don't know that I'm going to be, throwing him up in my, Dynasty Top 100 rankings or anything like that soon. But, he's on the radar. So he's got all of our attention right now. And, yeah, I think you're smart to probably roll him out. I will say one thing against Baun is that the Eagles get the Falcons this week. And, I watched that, Pittsburgh Atlanta game, and Pittsburgh linebackers were total drags on your lineups in week 1. So I don't know if that means anything for week 2. It's just 1 week, not necessarily a trend yet. But I am a little bit worried about that one, but not enough to keep Baun out of my lineup for sure.
Yeah, it's a fair call. I've got Baun in one league where I was pretty light at linebacker. I was really happy to have found him when I did. I didn't add him in with any confidence that he would be an every down guy. And so maybe I'm a little bit biased that he's come along to save what was otherwise going to be a struggling team, playing the likes of, Ivan Pace and his reduced snap share so far. Baun is going to be my savior for the year, and he's going to guide me to a championship. I'm 100% confident about that.
You should be.
Watch me.
Jase, I'll tell you, man, if you'd have told us 2 years ago Devin White would just be dead weight and Zack Baun would be a thing. But hey, that's fantasy linebackers. I mean, there you go. That's the game in a nutshell.
You're so right. Like, Devin White and Nakobe Dean as well to some extent. These are every bit the sort of prototypical modern linebackers, right? Super fast. And Baun is that guy that I think I heard, we talked about Tom Kay earlier on. I think I heard Tom Kay talk about Baun's turning circle being akin to that of an Arctic truck, right? He's not a dynamic, super fast linebacker, but he gets the job done. And when the coaching staff seem to believe in him as much as they do, and that's showing out in terms of how they're using him and the production that he's putting together, these ideas, these opinions we have of these players, they have to change. And this is why, to my mind, holding opinions lightly in cases like these certainly there's dividends that get paid at the end of all this, isn't there? When these guys kind of just come through and kind of deliver for you, even though you might not have loved them from the outset.
That's right. This is a hard lesson I learned with TJ Edwards, because I remember watching him early in his career, even in college, and I was just like, this man is like running in molasses. And you know what? He knows what he's doing. Coaches trust him. He knows where to be, and it results in tackles. So yeah, you're right. You have to check yourself once you get these notions in your head about what a player is and what they're capable of, because there's a lot more to the game than we can see.
Yeah, and especially at linebacker, right, where it's not just about talent, or it's not nearly as much about talent as it is for, say, the defensive line. These guys just need to be out there a lot of the time. Yes, it helps if they're playing in a zone-heavy scheme. Yes, it helps if they are being used in the right way, maybe not blitzing so much. But as long as they're out there 100% of the snaps, you should be starting them in the vast majority of IDP leagues out there.
Yep, no doubt.
So let's flip this and talk about linebackers we don't like. Who do you want to bring up first?
I hate to do this. I don't want to bring him up, but I'm going to bring up Bobby Wagner, who has led me to IDP greatness so many times. But with the Giants headed to Washington, like game script wise, it should be better for the Giants this week than last, when they just got torched by the Vikings. But still, I just don't see Big Blue establishing the run per se and then controlling the game clock. So I have a feeling Wagner's going to see this lower snap opportunity, particularly versus the run. And we've seen, according to his PFF grades, a drop off in Wagner's coverage ability over the past year. So, last week, Minnesota got up big on New York. We'll see if that happens again with Washington. I'm not sure it will, but I do think it's possible. So game script wise, I'm not sure. And I know, Blake Cashman was that full-time linebacker for the Vikings last week. And even in that game, he was not much of a fantasy factor. Neither was Pace, who you mentioned earlier. I might still need to start Wags this week, depending on league size, lineup requirements, depth. But I am lowering expectations for the future Hall of Famer this week.
Yeah, that's a tough one to get on board with, because it's Bobby Wagner, and I guess do you think the game script will be similar to this week? Do you think Washington are capable of doing what the Vikings did?
Probably not, but I wouldn't rule it out either, because they have a dynamic quarterback, and they're capable, I think, of explosive plays, especially against a defense like New York. So. It's hard to see a game script where they get behind that quickly, but I'm not going to rule it out either. And I just don't know that I trust the Giants to really get anything going on the ground. And I don't think that Wagner is enough of a plus in the passing game right now that I would trust him in that kind of environment.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. You make a good case, but like you said, if you've got him as a starting linebacker, and you're gonna have to really dig deep to try and find somebody who is capable of replacing him, and who is as consistently reliable as Wagner's been over the years. So I don't disagree with you on the unfavorable matchup point, but it's Bobby Wags, so I'm struggling to drop him where I've got him, and to be honest, I don't have him in that many places, so I'm kind of talking hypothetically, I guess.
He's going to make me this week, I'm sure of it, but I'll put him in there anyway.
So the guy I want to throw some shade at this week is Denzel Perryman. Easy pickings compared to your Bobby Wagner, your brave Bobby Wagner call. I wasn't a big fan of Perriman in his first spell with the Chargers. I never thought he would have a big season this year, like others seemed to. But even I thought he would at least start the year in a full-time or a near full-time role while Colson got up to speed. Colson had, after all, missed a bunch of time in recent weeks with appendicitis. But then, Jesse Minter, Chargers DC, came along, suggested that he wanted to keep his guys fresh, suggested there might be some sort of rotation, and that came to fruition. Henley, Colson, and Perriman rotated heavily. None of them played more than 67% of the snaps. And yeah, it's really hard to trust a guy like Perriman who actually played only 50% of the snaps. He's just not startable while he's playing such a small role. And again, it kind of concerns me greatly that he's already ceding snaps to Colson, who had such little time to prepare. So do you think there's any chance that Perriman could rise like a phoenix from the flames and secure a role big enough to make him startable again the rest of the way this year?
It's hard to see it. I never rule anything out, but yeah, it's kind of death right now. I mean, I was thinking about Perriman, and like, other than that 2021 season with the Raiders, that was the year he had. I looked it up. He had 863 defensive snaps, had 154 combined tackles. You know, he was an LB1 that year. Never, ever, ever, ever has come close to that opportunity or production over the course of any other season. So, you know, I think we talked about biases that we have and notions that we have of players. I think with Perriman, a lot of it is buried in that season where he was great, and it's kind of hard to let that go sometimes. But yeah, he's, you know, for now, I wouldn't advocate that you drop him in the league sizes I play in, where you're starting 11 players and like up to 4 linebackers. But he's kind of dead weight right now. You can't roll him out there with any kind of confidence. I mean, if they had an injury, you know, to Colson maybe, then you might see him get up to a snap volume that, you know, assuming he's healthy, you might get him up to that volume where you'd want to put him in your lineup. But yeah, you can't start him right now.
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head there. That one super productive, uber efficient year he had with the Raiders, but never, I forget the numbers off the top of my head, but never more than sort of 600 plus snaps in any other year but that one year. And that's not just about, I know he's had his struggles with injuries, but it's not just about injuries. He's a limited player. I've been saying this for the entire offseason since he signed with the Chargers. I had a good look at him in his first stint with the Chargers, and there was that like, oh damn, he's gone to our rivals, and he's all of a sudden become this linebacker one in IDP and this super productive player. But since then, it's all been kind of downhill again. I definitely think he can serve a role as a run stuffer, perhaps, on early downs, but that's not enough to want to start him outside of the very deepest of leagues for me.
Yeah, same. It's got to be a deep league. I do have one league that I'm probably going to start him in, but it's like IDP only. You got to play 16 guys. I got to start 3 linebackers, and like I don't have much. Like I do have like Troy Reader. I'm throwing him out there. So yeah, I'm probably going to have to play Perriman in that league. But yeah, otherwise, like, you have to be desperate.
Yeah, I'd start Reader over Perriman all day, every day, until, you know, we see anything different than that which we saw in week 1.
Yep.
So let's talk about some defensive linemen. Who do you like on the defensive line this week?
Yep. So I picked Byron Young. I know that Jared Verse, you know, is there in LA now, and people are all over the shiny new toy, rightfully so. But, you know, Young's a perfectly acceptable complementary edge to Verse. He played 49 snaps last week. You know, wasn't great. Had an 8.7% win rate, 8.7% pressure rate. Just had 2 pressures, but he did convert one of them to a sack. So you might be thinking about whether you want to sit him this week. And, you know, I wouldn't necessarily blame you if you wanted to do that. But in deeper leagues, you know, he lined up exclusively on the left side in week 1. And here in week 2, we'll be doing his one-on work outside over Kelvin Beachum on the right side of the Cardinals offensive line. So Beachum is in there because you may have seen Jonah Williams got hurt last week and was just placed on IR today. And PFF gave Beachum a 47.1 pass block grade on the week for week 1, and that's really bad. He played 25 snaps in pass protection. He allowed 4 pressures and 2 sacks. Of course, it was Gregory Rousseau. But still, this matchup is good, and I like Young more than I normally would in any other week.
Yeah, so hands up, I nominated Young as my DB dislike for week 1, partly because last year Obviously very productive, but required a lot of volume in order to be productive. Had some slight concern that Michael Hecht might play a bigger role than we envisaged. Assumed Verse would slot in as the second guy. Verse did slot in as the second guy, and he was quite productive, and it was great to see. But Young's, his snap share, 80%. He's going to have, even if he doesn't improve from last year, and there's every chance that he can, as a rookie going into year 2 this year, there's every chance that he can improve in terms of his pressure rate, his win rate, etc. But even if he doesn't, if he continues to play a role as large as that which he had last year, then he's gonna finish with decent production yet again. And like you say, he's got a good matchup this week. So no disagreement there, even though he was my dislike last week. His role's great.
Well, he's just, you're not going to want to start him every week, but you can start him when the matchup is right. And I think it's right this week. Yeah,
I'm with you. So how reactive is this one then? So I'm going to go with Keion White of the Patriots here, and I'll refer to your earlier argument about how I'm not going to be talking about guys like the top 12 guys. What help is that to anybody really? So Keion White for me, he was pretty rubbish in his rookie season. Granted, he was a bit unlucky to finish with only, I think it was 1 sack, 20 pressures, but his pressure rate was abysmal, 6.6%. There wasn't much hope he'd have much of a role this year beyond sort of a rotational piece. But then Matt Judon got traded. White had some pretty impressive performances in the preseason, so it was really encouraging to see that carry over into week 1. Granted, it's just 1 game, and he did convert like 100% of his pressures into sacks, 3 pressures, 3 sacks, which we know definitely won't happen every week going forward. But that 80% snap share was way above what I expected it to be. He led the Patriots edge rushers in that category, and that kind of bodes well for his opportunities going forward. So for much of the same reason why I don't dislike Byron Young this week, after seeing what his usage was last week, I have a similar outlook in terms of Keion White. Huge role, even if his performances drop off, and they will drop off after what he did last week. I'm all aboard. I think he can have a productive year. It just depends on whether he can keep that sort of sizable role. And after his performance last week, why would that dip in week 2?
Yeah, every year we see breakout guys, and I think White's he's one of those guys this year. This week in particular, he gets Seattle. Think about last week, the Seahawks had Denver, and they give up a ton of pressure to Jonathan Cooper, and then Baron Browning, Zach Allen, they were also acceptable at least. The thing about White is, if you've got him in my fantasy league, like, he's a total cheat code. He's classified as a defensive tackle, but the vast majority of his snaps come at edge. He's just huge. He's just massively big edge. Assuming like he's still 290 pounds, like he came into the league at, like he's just huge.
Yeah. And like you say, majority of snaps at the edge, kind of like a bit like Dietrich Wise in some ways, in the sense that he can be used in multiple roles. But if he's got that DT designation, then what's not to like? And there's nothing that I don't like about him going into week 2. I think he's got every chance to massively outperform his ADP. I'm not looking at his ADP right now, but I know it would have been super low because he was a kind of a late riser as we got towards the start of the season. So if you got him and you're in a deep league, maybe like as a DL3, it's worth starting him this week, I think.
Oh gosh, yeah.
I think if I remember, he spent most of his time on the left edge, and I do forget who the right edge is for the Seahawks. It's not Charles Cross. I know he's on the left, and he's the better of the 2 tackles. But I do remember the right tackle is far weaker. Geno's pretty good at evading pressure. I do know that. So in terms of like a matchup this week, maybe it's not the week for me to choose him as the guy to talk about. But I felt like he deserved a mention after what he did last week. And again, talking about how he carried it over from the preseason.
Fair. Yeah. The only thing I don't like about him is he's giving Patriots fans something to get excited about. And I'm enjoying them being down. We lived through too many years of Patriot dominance. So
Yeah, that's fair. It's fair. I don't think even the Patriots fans that are listening in or watching us now would begrudge us from in saying that. So yeah. So
Well,
who do you dislike, Jason?
well, dislike is strong, but I picked Will Anderson, and
You
don't throw
hate him.
anything at me. Hey, he did have a very quiet week one. I mean, just one pressure, just a couple of tackles. I don't think this is really the week for him to get it going. Chicago did a relatively good job against Tennessee last week, even though Harold Landry got a sack on 3 pressures. But Anderson over on the right, he'll be going against Braxton Jones. This game has one of the lowest totals of the week at 40.5. Kind of like you said with Gino. Caleb's got the escapability factor. I was looking at next gen stats. He had 2.71 seconds to throw, which is at least average. So he's at least getting that average time to get rid of the ball. So I would just say, if you've got another viable option, and I know everybody that has Anderson either spent a lot of rookie draft capital or you drafted him highly in a redraft, but I'm probably just kind of looking away from him this week, especially if you've got somebody, in a DL setting like Keion White and you drafted him late. I might just, cool my heels on Anderson, see if he can, get going again in week 3. I don't see it happening again in week 2.
Yeah, that's going to ruffle some feathers, isn't it? Anderson is
Yes.
beloved in the IDP community. What do you think about Anderson in general? Help me frame what your dislike for him this week in terms of what
it's really just kind of a weekly thing. I like him. I've got him. I've certainly got him in my top 10 dynasty IDP rankings. So it's nothing I have against the player. I realize he's young. The strength that he has right now is with his power and his bull rush. And I trust for players like him. The rest of the game will come along. So I like the player. It's more, he had a slow week 1, and I don't like the matchup this week. So, granted, most people are still going to play him. You're not going to have a choice because you invested in him. You don't want to miss out on when he has a big week. But in smaller leagues, like, I'm probably just not putting him out there.
Yeah, and that's it, right? So if you're in a really shallow league and you're choosing between like a Will Anderson and a Myles Garrett, Nick Bosa, that sort of thing, you're stacked at edge rusher. If that's the case, then yeah, I can understand your point there. It's just really hard to drop a player of that caliber, especially when they can go off. Braxton Jones is a good left tackle, but he's not one of the premier left tackles, I wouldn't say. So there is a chance that Anderson could still go off this week and kind of like make that quiet week 1 look like a distant memory. But yeah, I don't totally disagree with you. I'd find it hard to drop him where I've got him.
I just don't like him as much as I normally would. It's just like Wags. Love the player. Typically not going to hesitate putting him in a lineup, but I will lower expectations this week. I don't hate Will Anderson, folks. I love him.
That's it. Jason.
I'm not going to run out of my way to roll him in the lineups this week if I've got better options.
Jason King hates Will Anderson. That's it.
There you go. I'm turning into Tom.
When I promote this show on X, that's gonna be what I'm gonna lead with. Massive bold letters. So I've gone with you've been much bolder than I have, and for that I give you props. I've gone with easier pickings here. I've gone with Bryce Huff of the Eagles, and I love him as a pass rusher, and I enjoyed having him on a bunch of best ball teams last year, but his deficiencies in run defense are a problem. The Eagles have been pretty transparent and pretty upfront about their concerns about him in that sense. Fangio described Huff as a work in progress when asked why he only played 45% of the snaps last week, which ranked behind Josh Sweat. Kind of fair enough. Brandon Graham, yeah, he's getting up there, but maybe also fair enough. He's still a good player. But Nolan Smith, yeah, I know he's got the draft capital, but yeah, that surprised me. Fangio also said that Huff has to, careful not to misquote him, consistently show improvement to become a guy that he can rely on more going forward. So, kind of unless Huff suddenly demonstrates dramatic progress in his abilities to kind of like play against the run, I'm fading him. Jason. I'm sure he'll have those boom or bust weeks, and I might leave him on those rosters in some of those best ball leagues that I talked about a moment ago. But yeah, I'm not willing to gamble on those low floor weeks in any other types of league formats. I'd rather a Keion White type of guy whose snap share is almost double that of what Huff's was last week. So yeah, am I mad? Do you think he's too talented to drop or to bench in IDP?
No, of course not. Like, 0 pressures, 1 tackle last week. I think the thing is, it's like when he signed that contract and he got out of New York, I think we all expected that next stop would be the place where he saw the spike in volume, and it didn't happen in week 1, and it doesn't sound like it's going to be changing anytime soon, based on what you just said. So yeah, he's playing the same role he was playing with the Jets, and I don't know how much like that field in Brazil was to blame for the low output last week, but this just, I mean, you cannot roll him out there with any confidence right now.
No. And yeah, unless again, what they're talking about him needing to show improvement in is something that he's never been good at. So that's a real worry. Why did they sign him? Is I guess the question. Maybe they thought he was better in run defense than he actually is. You'd like to think they would have known about this before they signed him, but yeah, maybe it's motivation. Maybe this is just that they're trying to light a fire under him and get the best out of him. Who knows?
Yeah, I'm going to go back now. After this show, I'm going to go back and I'm going to look at his contract and see what the out looks like after week 1. I mean, after the first year. No, we're getting out after week 1. Yeah, I want to see like how easy is it for them to get out of that contract after this year.
You'd be a really harsh GM, like just dropping guys after week 1. Like it's like,
yeah, it's cutthroat. He signed a good contract. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but he signed a good contract there, which is why we were also hopeful that okay, they're paying him, he's going to get the volume.
Yeah, so, I mean, Reddick was gone, and yes, I've been a bit of a fan of Josh Sweat over the years. Steady improvement every year, with the exception of last year. Yeah, Brandon Graham is getting up there in age. Nolan Smith didn't seem quite ready last year. It seemed like a really good fit for Huff. Jalen Carter in the middle. It seemed like an ideal situation, but I guess not. Maybe it'll change. Well, it's something we'll monitor, right? But for now, it's just not something I want to invest too heavily in from week to week. I need to see it change to believe it, and only then will I be trusting Huff again.
That's right. You just park him on your bench. I wouldn't do anything rash and cut the man.
No.
Maybe if I were paying him a lot of money, I would. But in this case, no. You just park him on the bench, and then see if it improves, and if it doesn't, and you get toward the playoffs, then you go ahead and make the change if you need depth for your run. But otherwise, yeah, there's no way he's sniffing any of my lineups right now.
Yeah. So I've got my second line now for my promotional tweet for this show. So Jason hates Will Anderson, and he would have cut Bryce Huff if he was the Eagles GM. So yeah, good stuff.
I'm not going to sing. about John Franklin Myers, so you can't use that one.
Yeah, that would make a change from last week's guest. So yeah, I mean, yeah. So let's talk some DBs, Jason. Who do you like this week and why?
Yeah, so I'll actually put DeShon Elliott in here. So made his debut with the Steelers last week. Had a solid one. 10 snaps in the box, 20 in the slot. Just 16 back at free safety. Was productive in week 1. As like a high-end safety too. Only made 1 solo tackle and 3 assists, so that nice point total in your fantasy box score was probably just due to that interception. So for that reason, you might see that and then be tempted to sit him based on something that's a little bit of a fluky stat. But Pittsburgh, of course, has Denver this week, and the Broncos were a little bit of a gift for safety production in week 1 against Seattle. You may have seen Julian Love as the S1 on the week. Even without the forced fumble and the interception, he still had 10 solos and 2 assists, which is really nice. I mean, even Rayshon Jenkins was usable as well. So keep in mind, Love played 69 defensive snaps last week. Elliott should not come close to that number if things play out the way Pittsburgh wants. But still, the matchup looks better than usual for Elliott. And if you're in need of, an S2 or an S3, somebody got hurt, you drafted guys that are not working out, I wouldn't hesitate to throw Elliott in there.
Yeah, I think he fits that mold of what you said about you're not going to be talking about that top tier of guys. I don't see Elliott in that way. But if you're talking about like a DB2, a DB3, at that level, these guys are largely interchangeable, aren't they? A lot of teams will be rolling out there with maybe the DB they drafted really highly, the Winfields, the Derwin Jameses, the Kyle Hamiltons. Beyond that, I'm not getting too invested in a lot of these guys, and Elliott is as good as most. Did you see though why? And I don't have the answer to this question. Genuinely asking you, why didn't he play every down last week? I didn't see much of the end of that Steelers game, so I'm not sure why he didn't play every down. But I did notice that when I was looking at some of my spreadsheets earlier this week.
Yeah, I've got to go back and look at that. My first instinct was I think he got dinged on something, but I may be misremembering that. I may be confusing him with Joey Porter, who I know missed some snaps because I think he hurt his wrist or something.
Yeah,
I know he had to go into the tent, but I don't remember that on Elliott.
Okay. Yeah. All good.
I don't have a good answer for you. It's a good.
No, it's all good. It's all good. I know he had a really high snap share. It just wasn't quite like that 100% level. That's usually, I need those guys to be at that sort of 90% plus, if not 100%. Really, there's plenty of guys who are, but like you said, his alignment was quite nice. So, and who's the third guy? Casey is nothing at all. So I wouldn't be surprised if after a big week like Elliott had last week, interception, pass breakup, whether or not he did just consign KZ to the scrap heap. So we'll have to wait and see, I guess. But yeah, I don't disagree with that one. My guy, I've gone with Old Faithful, Harrison Smith. I've loved Smith throughout his entire career. He's so old now, and I kind of expected his involvement, or wouldn't have been surprised rather if his involvement would have dropped off a little bit. Last week, they've got two really talented guys there now in Metellus and Bynum. Not only talented, but also very productive in IDP too. But Smith, had a good week, 6 tackles and an interception. We know those interceptions aren't reliable. We know we can't, rely on those every week, even for a guy who's been a career ball hawk like Smith. But what was more encouraging, as I say, was his involvement almost every down. I think he only missed like a couple of snaps in total, spent almost 40% of his snaps in the box. There is a chance that his role may be reduced as the season unfolds, but for now, I don't see anything not to like about Smith.
Yeah, he's still younger than me, so I'm not going to call him old. But I love all those Viking safeties, especially this week against the Niners. San Fran, as of recent years, has yielded better than average production against opposing safeties. And yeah, both Smith, Metellus, those are both really strong plays this week. I like them both.
Yeah, that's kind of spoiled for choice, aren't they, right now, the Vikings safeties? So who's your dislike at the position? Who are you fading in week 2?
Yeah, I was going to go with Nick Cross, and he threw him in the poll, so I didn't want to go there. But I'll say I'm not crazy about Amani Hooker this week. I saw him pop as like the safety 4 in week 1. That is, of course, kind of depending on scoring systems, but he had a forced fumble that helps pad the fantasy stats. He did see 22 snaps either in the box or in the slot or along the defensive line, but he was at free safety for 34 snaps according to the PFF charting. And then on Monday Night Football, the Niners safeties were just not at all productive against the Jets, and so that's who Tennessee's going against this week. So the usage and the matchup worry me a little bit on the fantasy side. I do, I like Hooker as an NFL player. Larger leagues, I'm rolling him out there, pretty consistently as an S2 or an S3. But I'm just avoiding him a bit this week. And I think it's probably just more of seeing what happened with San Francisco safeties. And they were just it's like Pittsburgh linebackers last week, just non-existent, just a total drag if you've had them in your lineup.
Yeah. We're not too far apart in this one. I like Hooker too as a player. I kind of came around to him a little bit last year. Um, we do. The only thing I would say, I guess we do have to be a little careful not to invest too much in what we saw just last week in terms of how position groups did against specific teams, because schemes can change, not schemes, but game plans can change from one week to the next, and um, with so many new offensive coordinators, so many new offensive players, even if we look back at last year, there's only so much to glean from that information. So there's a small part of me that's kind of reserving judgment until we see maybe like 2, 3, 4 games, a bit more of a body of work. But yeah, you don't need me to tell you your reasoning is sound. And if there's always, as I said before, like a really small margin call between one guy or another. So yeah, when it comes to 100% DBs that play similar usage, that have similar alignment, yeah, why would you not choose a different guy over Hooker this year? Can't think of an example right now, but yeah, I don't hate this call.
Yeah, well, like you said, we're so early in the season.
Yeah,
Typically you get a little further into the season, you've got some trends, and things start popping pretty consistently. It's so hard when you're doing these types of shows in like week 1, week 2. You don't have that trend line.
yeah,
So I don't know that that would be a consistent thing that you would see for safety production against the Jets, but it did pop to me in that 1 week, and so that scares me a little bit. So it's enough for me to maybe consider some light guys over Amani Hooker this week, even though he had the huge week 1.
yeah, yeah. Right there with you. So my dislike is a guy who's been consistently poor throughout his career in terms of being an IDP asset, and that's Andre Cisco of the Jaguars. His tackle production is always terrible. His usage is always terrible. Last week, I'm looking at it now, played 55 of his 64 snaps deep. Yes, he'll pop off for an interception, a pass breakup every now and again, but it's not enough to kind of compensate for that really poor tackle production. Looking back over the last 2 seasons, he's played almost 1,000 snaps in 2022, had 63 tackles, and last year he had 56 tackles on 850 snaps. That's really poor. He's just not the kind of guy I want for most of my lineups, even in best ball. Any thoughts on Cisco, Jason? Do you disagree on him?
No, I don't disagree with you at all. He's a big play guy, but yeah, you have no tackle floor there, and so that hurts. I'm okay with him on best ball, but other than that, it's really hard to roll somebody like Andre Cisco out. I don't really like any of those Jaguar safeties, even though I know Antonio Johnson's. He's probably gave some decent production there in week 1, and he's probably the guy you would want. But yeah, you're dead on Cisco. I like the player. I mean, it'd be good with me if I were running the team. If he's hanging out back there in center field.
Yep.
That's his role, and that's not a very productive fantasy role.
No, exactly. And yeah, like you say, I'd be quite happy as well. So, like you say, center fielder, he's very talented, he's very capable. I just don't want him to be in my IDP lineups. It's as simple as that. And there's a bunch of guys that kind of fit that description, I suppose. So let's move on to our very last player that we're going to talk about. The guy who our listeners have voted on in our weekly poll on X, and the player who won that weekly poll with 37% of the votes, and I expected it to be higher actually, was Greg Rousseau, who had a massive performance last weekend. Where do you stand on Greg Rousseau, Jason?
Yeah, I would say the rocket ship is in flight. Spatial orbit is no guarantee. We haven't reached it yet. So yeah, I like Rousseau. I mean, 16% pass rush win rate, 16% pressure rate in week 1. You mentioned it before, 3 sacks on 4 pressures, 6 tackles. Most importantly, 79% snap share, 48 snaps. So, it's not a career high on the snap total, but it was on the snap share, and that's what we've been looking for. We've been looking to see if we can get him up close to that 80% mark. And in his first 3 years in the league, he eclipsed a 65% snap share just 8 times. So volume has certainly been a factor that's been holding him back from a fantasy perspective. And, I've kind of remained high on him for dynasty, just thinking that, like, one, there's a possibility he'd leave as a free agent. 2, Sean McDermott, he could get fired. There's been that pressure on him. Or 3, the Bills could come to their senses and they could give their best pass rusher a higher snap share. And so, the latter actually happened in week 1. And so the question now is, will it continue? And, the true answer is, I don't know. I don't think that we can confidently say it will be just kind of based on that first week. But I can confidently say that Teron Armstead's better than Arizona's left tackle. And I can say that, in general, Miami's pass protection is better than Arizona's. So also, like, Thursday night football, that's just kind of unpredictable and it's often ugly. So I don't know exactly what to expect from Rousseau this week. I'm not seeing, what he did in week 1, but I'm still kind of auto-clicking that start box next to his name until further notice, just provided it's a start 2 defensive end setup and you're not, playing like 3 IDPs each week. Yeah, I'm going to start him. He's close. This may be the year that he finally reaches that 80%, or close to snap share, and we see him, in the top 12 of the edge players because he's got that talent.
He does, and we've been waiting for it for a little while. He's not to say that he's been poor, like you said. He just hasn't seen that snap volume that a lot of other guys who are performing at a similar level have gone on to earn, and that's not his fault. That's as you said, a defensive coordinator thing. And I've kind of taken a similar approach to you. It's not going to be this way forever. He is a young guy. At some point, things are going to change. Either, like you say, they're going to give him more volume, or there's going to be a change in coordinator or a change in scheme with a new coordinator. And yeah, it seems like that's been going on for some time now. He's never hit those double-digit sacks, and you stole my point earlier on. That role in week 1, 79%. And you went a bit deeper than I did because I was just looking at last year and noted that he didn't earn that snap share at any point in any game. But I would be a little more confident than you that this is going to continue because the likes of, Leonard Floyd isn't around anymore. Von Miller has shown that he's not the same guy anymore. Epenezer's still there, but other than Epenezer, there's not another guy there that I would totally trust to be able to perform as well as Rousseau if Rousseau wasn't on the field. And that's not something I've always been able to say about the other guys behind Rousseau. So I'm slightly more confident in the idea that we can see this kind of volume out of him going forward, or at least very similar to it. So I think it's a great start for Rousseau. Yes, he's not going to have this sort of level of week every week, but it's really encouraging to see, and I'm all aboard the Rousseau train.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. It's hard not to get excited about Rousseau after just waiting for so long. It's not really the trust in Rousseau. It's just the coaching staff. And like we said, it's 1 week. I kind of want to see the trend that's a little bit longer than 1 week, but I'm hopeful. Yeah. I'm hopeful this is the year that, they have figured it out. They're like, okay, hey, this guy's like our best guy. We should have him out there more often than not. Let's get him up to that 80% snap share. I mean, if you want to go to 100% snap share and he could be like Max Crosby, that's great too, but I'll settle for 80% right now.
I want to believe that someone in the building's like, this guy that we've been playing for 4 years in a really deep rotation on the edge. Does somebody realize he's like way better than everybody else we've got out there? Shall we give him a bigger role? And then after week 1, they're like, see, I told you so. All you had to do was watch what he was doing every week. But yeah, I know what you're saying. And I'm going back on my earlier point about needing to see a body of work. But I feel with Rousseau, we've kind of seen that. He's been consistently good for many years. And like you said, it's just been that opportunity that's been holding him back. But now I'm pretty confident he's going to get that opportunity, and he might sort of gravitate from being that reliable, solid edge 2, low end edge 2, into becoming maybe a low end edge 1 this year. Certainly,
yeah,
like
you're
I
in
said,
outer space.
The right way.
Yeah, I'm still watching the ship. It's not there in outer space yet, but it's headed that direction. I'm pretty confident it's not going to blow up.
Right. Jason also hates Greg Rousseau. Right.
You can say anything. You're not going to get me to sing, so
Singing me a song about Greg Rousseau. You owe me that much at least. No. Well, look, that's we've come to the end, Jason. Brings us to the end of our week 2 IDP preview episode of the IDP After Show. Thanks so much for coming on. I warned you before we came on tonight that I would be embarrassing you at some point by telling everybody how much I enjoy your work. I'm not just saying that. We've worked together for a while now, and imagine how happy I was to hear that you were following me to the IDP show. You really do bring a lot to our sort of not so little group over here. I messaged you not so long ago to compliment you on an article that you'd written. I think it was Dodson and Baker, if I'm not mistaken.
I did write that up, yeah.
Yeah, just to give you some props on your work, just the depth to which you analyze both players and the situation, the scheme, their outlook going forward. Didn't get too over the top in terms of what you expected from them, but also you weren't like some doom monger either. It was really insightful. I learned something reading that, and I think, as I said to you at the time, my favorite articles are those which I go into feeling I know what the outcome of the article is going to be, and I know that I have a different opinion, and then I come out of it with a slightly different perspective, or at least wanting to revisit some of the reasons why I thought differently, and starting to challenge some of my own views. So yeah, you did that, and yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing more of the same.
Well, you're sweet. Thanks for saying that, Jase. Yeah, I do the writing part because I want to come away and learn something too. And so typically, I will go in to write something that I don't know a lot about, but I want to test myself on it and see if I can learn anything. I can't tell you the number of times I started an article and just, I'm not learning anything here, so there's no point in continuing it, because I'm not coming away with a different opinion that I already have or that everybody else already has. And I will say, Josh is persuasive. And I knew it was okay to come over to the IDP show when I saw that you were here. So
there you go. There you go. So to that end, let's please tell our audience what content they can expect from you, or should hope to see from you for the rest of the way in 2024, and where they can find your work.
Yeah, so I'm hoping to maybe produce an every other week kind of rookie watch column for the IDP show. Still trying to make sure that I've got the actual time to put that article together, and still doing the IDP rankings over at DLF, so Dynasty League Football, for top 150 Dynasty ranks, and still keep up the rookie ranks over there too.
Sounds cool. Look forward to it. Thanks again to our audience, whether you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or just watching us on YouTube. Thank you for tuning in to the IDP After Show. If you found this useful or helpful in some way, please subscribe to our channels to make sure you don't miss out on future episodes. In this, our guest interview feed, where you can hear from the smartest voices like Jason King every week. Good luck in week 2, and bye for now.
This was the IDP After Show.